Hi, everybody. This is Charlene O'Hanlon, Managing Editor at DevOps.com with DevOps TV, and I'm here at the DevOps Enterprise Summit in Las Vegas. I have some very smart people sitting at the table next to me. We're starting with CJ Napolitano, who is with Electric Cloud, followed by Sid Sijbrandij from GitLab, and finally Ubaid Dhiyan, who is with Union Square Advisors. So welcome, gentlemen. Thank you all for joining me today.
Thanks for having us.
So the topic of today's discussion is VCs and DevOps. So I'm sure it's a topic that all of you are familiar with in one way or another. So what I'm really looking for is kind of taking the pulse of the VC market in respect to DevOps. Where you guys see some action happening, where you see maybe some areas of interest, where you see maybe some areas that maybe could use a little bit more love. Why don't we start with you?
Sure. So the way I think about the VC investment thesis and philosophy is it's a function of both pattern matching, where if something gets really interesting, there's a lot of people that storm into the space. DevOps is a great example of that because it touches everything. Mark Andreessen said several years ago that software is eating the world, and all of us have really come to believe that because we see it all around us in every industry. VCs have invested about $5 billion in 300 deals just in the last 3 years, since 2016. And then the other side of that spectrum is that there have been more than 80 deals catching up to $64 billion in M&A just focused on DevOps. So that tells you that this line between the investment and an execution and finally an acquisition is very clear. And that continues to gather momentum, especially when you have very high profile deals like the GitHub transaction that Microsoft did. And just in the last few weeks, we have heard about GitLab raising a large amount of money, as well as JFrog raising 165 million.
Right.
So a lot of focus, a lot of interest, and a lot of money flow that continues to go towards DevOps.
Sid, being that your company or your organization has been in the news lately with VC funding, what is it that you maybe noticed during the process that working with VC investors, what were some of the things that you noticed maybe that they're very interested in the DevOps space?
Yeah, on one hand, GitHub acquisition Atlassian set a great comparable in the market. I think they're aware of the bigger trend. Every company is becoming a software company, so the speed with which you can improve your company is the speed between planning something and getting it out there and monitoring the results. So anything that helps companies reduce that cycle time, that is very valuable. And that was where the interest is coming from. In the end, our $100 million round was closed with an investor that already we talked with for 800 days. So
wow.
It was long-term interest. But they're seeing that a great DevOps tooling is essential, and it's getting harder. You see this explosion of, on one hand, projects, applications with microservices. On the other hand, more and more tooling in the DevOps space that you need to integrate. So with GitLab, since we offer an all-in-one solution, you can reduce that complexity, and that is where they see the value.
Okay. CJ, what are you guys seeing over at Electric Cloud as far as where the interest is lying?
Right. So I think that like my colleague here, we're a market leader, so there's a lot of interest in terms of what we're doing, and I think that this stage of DevOps is the how you unlock the value for the next big push in software, right? So I think everybody's seeing that some of the prerequisite trends that have sort of created this environment, so that the emergence of the internet and then the cloud, now you've got microservices coming on board, but at the enterprise level, it's not just about the new stuff. These companies have real problems spanning. They want to do DevOps for mainframe.
Exactly.
Right. So it's a superset of all of the kind of foundational layers that have been set, and I think that's why why there's such an interest in the market. It's the common denominator of really how large swaths of the economy are going to become productive and competitive going forward.
Okay.
Yeah. Just to add to what CJ is driving at, and something we think about at Union Square a lot, which is around digital transformation. When you talk about DevOps impacting every single vertical, the idea is that a company that is a retailer, you don't think of as a software company. But today it is very much real that whether you are selling sneakers or whether you're selling DVDs or streaming music or video over the internet, you are a software company, and you have to have a strategy around that. And I was in the line checking in just now, and one of the comments I heard was someone from the Water District in Las Vegas was here at a DevOps conference. And then that was really interesting to me, that utilities, which you think of as brick and mortar as you can imagine, are here at a DevOps conference talking about how do we digitally transform what we do on a day-to-day basis to provide the right kind of service to our consumers who are the citizens of Las Vegas. So I think it's really become part of the overall thematic thinking. If you are getting into the industry and if you are in operations, you have to be thinking about how DevOps will help you do a better job.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, and I'm hearing that all the time also, that companies are now considering themselves software companies no matter what industry they're in. So, with that in mind, are you noticing any trends as far as, from the VC standpoint, that maybe VCs are kind of hyper-focusing on certain DevOps toolings and kind of things that go together, if you will, that so that they can kind of corner the DevOps market per se?
Yeah, so I think of sort of the market evolving in four different. There are four different buckets which work together. Mm-hmm. One is that around tools for software developers. Mm-hmm. One is tools for IT ops folks, and then there is an IT infrastructure piece and sort of broader IT technologies piece. Mm-hmm. And all of them need to be connected in one way or the other. And there are players like Electric Cloud which really bring all of them together in a way that you can operate with multiple technologies. And what I mean by that is a software development tool where, for example, a GitHub or a GitLab where you're developing software, and then pieces within the IT ops space, which could be Puppet or Chef, which is for configuration management. Technologies could be cloud or where your infrastructure resides, and then Kubernetes and microservices. All of those are sort of more longer term philosophies of developing software. The VCs are thinking about who are the folks who will be able to consolidate the maximum amount of functionality into a single platform. And I'm sure you think about this all the time. You mentioned this earlier as well, and CJ does as well. As a CEO of a DevOps platform, you want to be able to provide the most consolidated piece so that the decision making from the buyer perspective is reduced to buying one platform versus 50 different tools.
And I think last year we made an observation that Kubernetes is going to be that infrastructure layer. So that's a done deal. And then the biggest problem companies have is that split between their dev tools and their ops tools. Their developers that make software and their operators. And that's where things get stuck. Mm-hmm. The developers are ready, but there needs to be a security review, or they have to wait for a deployment window. So we made the decision to combine them, to build from GitLab, which is an integrated tool for dev at the time, to say GitLab is going to be an integrated tool for DevOps. We're going to add packaging, releasing, configuration, monitoring and security all in a single application, because otherwise you get that future split between Dev and Ops, and there's a reason we're at the DevOps conference right now. Bringing those two together is elementary. If you have different tools, you're going to have different teams, and they're not going to be on the same page. So that's what we're trying to solve.
Okay, great. So do you gentlemen see the VC market, do you think they're behind the curve or kind of on the curve or maybe ahead of the curve when it comes to DevOps investments?
Oh, I think that I think it's a mature investment thesis, and signals of that are, yes, the amount of money and deals that are happening, but you also see VCs that are specializing in DevOps. I mean, they are bringing on partners that just do so. It's actually now a category of investment, just like before it was maybe internet or media or healthcare, but now you actually see partners being brought on board just to develop their DevOps portfolios, and I think those VCs are particularly going to do well. Because they bring, portfolio companies, everybody wants to give us money when you're a market leader, right? So it's not about the money, it's about the value add, right? I'm sure you the reason he engaged with whoever he selected for 800 days is because they wanted to get to know each other, right? And we're in the same process. So it's not just about the money, it's what can you do to accelerate our growth, right? And I think the firms that are building DevOps practices and a portfolio ecosystem are going to do really well. And you're seeing more and more of that happening.
Ubaid, do you see the possibility of another kind of technology bubble around DevOps and the possibility that we could go through a bust like we did with the whole .com thing?
I graduated around the 2001 to 2003 time frame and then lived through the 2008 crisis. So never say never. There's always an opportunity and a likelihood that there is an asset bubble out there. And DevOps is no exception, in my opinion. But I think of DevOps as not, it's so broad, like CJ mentioned, people are thinking about internet as a category, and now you're talking about DevOps as a category, which the point is that it is so broad and so encompassing that it affects every single piece if you are any company that is going through any level of digital transformation. So yes, there is a possibility. However, I do think that we are in a market right now where the logic does apply. The impact that these companies and these products are having on the industry and on our overall economy does justify the kind of momentum and the capital that is flowing into the space. So yes, there are certainly some inflated valuations out there. There is no doubt about that. But on a broader basis, this does make sense to me from an investment environment perspective. And then one more quick point that I wanted to add around, it's not just the venture capitalists, and when you talk about maturity of investment thesis, it's not just the venture capitalists who are pouring in capital. There's a lot of what's called growth equity, which is not pure private equity, which is run more from a cash flow and EBITDA perspective, but rather the middle space between, okay, we invest a lot of money in all of these properties, but they still need that additional 100 million or 50 million, which is a pre-IPO round that really pushes growth to the point where the company becomes off scale and is able to go tap the public market subsequently. And in that we are seeing a lot more with very respected VC or VC PE growth equity arms investing a large amount of money and building portfolios of DevOps companies. It's not just one investment, it will be 4, 5, 6, 7 investments because they've brought in the right people who know the industry and know the market and want to invest.
So that speaks to a real maturity in the company then, that they've gotten to the point where they're beyond the initial funding, and
Absolutely.
they're more comfortable in their space, so to speak. So.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and to just piggyback on this, your original question about, is this a bubble? I think one of the big differentiators for this class of solution, it's the whole DevOps movement is a very data-driven, metrics-driven, approach, right? So you can't have a DevOps solution that doesn't deliver velocity, quality, utilization, all of those things, they have to go up. That's the whole reason they're buying these tools, and they're built into the product. So I think there's a fundamental quantitative value that customers can ascribe to these solutions that makes it real, and therefore sort of puts a lid on the bubble, so to speak, because the value is real.
I totally agree. So I think the valuations are based on multiples. The multiples are historic highs now in the public stock market, now in the private market as well. So valuations might come down, but those multiples are based on revenue. And the revenue is how much can you do for your customer. We promise, for example, a 200% faster DevOps lifecycle. That is an amazing value. Your time to market is greatly reduced, and you can put a dollar number on that. And that means that the DevOps tools market is going to be at least $10 billion in revenue a year. And I personally think it's going to be much higher than that. And that means that there's going to be companies that will be worth a lot, even if they're not like 30 times ARR, but only 10 times ARR. You're still going to have billion-dollar companies and $5 and $10 billion companies coming out of this market. So frothy valuations, but real savings for companies, and in the end, that's what builds a business.
Okay. Well, since you recently went through this process, can you kind of give us just a couple highlights of maybe what were some of the things that maybe kind of when you coming from it on the other side, what were some of the lessons that you learned going through this IPO process, and what are maybe some of the things that you kind of they were takeaways for you? Yeah,
so we didn't go to an IPO. We hope to do that in 2018. We did a fundraiser, Series D fundraise of 100 million. What we really wanted to do this time is collaborate with our strategic partners. So we have a partner in the financial services industry, which we were able to get as part of this round. And this is like the execution phase. Companies are really deploying this at scale. We got multiple customers with more than 10,000, 20,000 seats. We want them to tell the rest of the world, the rest of the industry, what the best practices are. So involving them in the fundraise was a really big thing for us.
Okay, great. Excellent. Well, it's fascinating what's going on in the VC space and DevOps right now. I mean, I feel like we could probably have a conversation all afternoon about it. But what are some of the things, just kind of final thoughts, Ubaid, what are some of the things that you're seeing or that you kind of farther on down the road that you're seeing in the VC space for DevOps?
Well, I see the investment momentum continuing over the next few years. One interesting thing that I'm pretty sure is going to happen is some of the companies that are starting to get scale, which are raising the $100 and $150 million rounds in this past 6-12 months, are going to start going public in 2019 and 2020.
Okay.
And that is also, the other aspect of that is, the other kind of exit that will happen is some of the biggest strategics in the market, whether it's Atlassian or Microsoft or ServiceNow, even Splunk has made moves into the broader IT ops, DevOps space. They will start making bigger and bigger acquisitions. Microsoft already kind of threw down the gauntlet with its acquisition of $7.5 billion. And then someone across, IBM is a big question mark as to where they are going from a strategic perspective. And they've had, after several quarters of no growth or low growth or declining growth, they had 2 quarters of growth and now they're declining again. So the question is, which one of these big players within the broader DevOps space will start making more strategic decisions and making some acquisitions as well? So that will also drive activity, both from the exit end, but also as more money is paid by these strategics and buyers and at IPOs, there will be more VC money continuing to come in. So that flow is not, I don't expect it to stop, because there is a lot to do. The market is massive, untapped, and there is more disruptive technologies out there that will be coming out, I see, in the next 2 to 5 years as this becomes much more prevalent from a digital transformation perspective, where all industries really become truly transformed.
I think there's a potential for a bad thing happening, which is the DevOps tools tax. As we get more and more tools in these companies, the effort to integrate all those tools is going up. And there's great tools like Electric Cloud that can help you with that, but companies are seeing that they have 20 to 60 people in their company just to integrate all the tools together. And as an industry, we need to solve that problem. Another thing that I think will happen is that we'll see the need to not pass the baton between teams and tools, but have everyone on the same page. Concurrent DevOps. Being able to, at any point, have people contribute so that it's not like, oh, as a developer, I've done my work, now to the security team, now to the operations team. Now have everyone on the same page and get visibility early in the process. That's the 2 things that might ruin the party, and that's what, as an industry, we need to find a solution for.
Okay, good point.
I think that sometimes maybe we lose a little bit of sight of, DevOps is really about process, tools, and people, right? And there's a big, obviously, process undercurrent. A lot of companies start getting their arms around that, and obviously, companies like us like to take the spotlight for the tools, but what about the people, right? So I think that somehow or another, whether investors fund that or other members of the community fund that, we've got to get the people in these companies armed and equipped and contemporary with taking advantage of these process and tools, right? So I think you're going to start seeing not only money, but a lot of activity happening in this sort of third pillar, which is how do we get people in these companies to be up to speed like the process and the tools are. And I think that's going to be a big wave coming as well.
Okay.
Yeah, I agree. A good corollary of what both CJ and Sid said just now is just around what happened in security. This is very similar, where there was a lot of momentum that continues to be, and because there are big complex problems to be solved, but then there are so many players out there that it becomes really confusing and difficult, and what's important is to have fewer tools which solve the right kinds of problems and also the right people, which is where orchestration is now coming in as a big piece, which I know Electric Cloud does, is to solve, at least to some extent, that people problem as well, but addressing it directly. So that's a good market to kind of observe and think about how things would change within DevOps as well.
We have a fundamentally different perspective. We studied the security market, and what our customers ask us is, we don't want another tool. If you bring in an orchestration tool, it just means another tool there. We want to retire some tools. We have too many right now. So tell us what we can retire. And we think that's going to be a trend, and that's what you see us doing, that's what you see GitHub doing, that's what you see Bitbucket doing, adding more to an integrated package, and I think that's going to be one of the trends in the future.
All right, great. And that's the perfect way to end this conversation. CJ, Sid, and Ubaid, thank you all for joining me today. Great conversation. Thank you.
Thanks for having us.